Hello and welcome to today's review of the Transformers 2007 movie Real Gear Robot Spyshot 6. Now this guy, just starting off here in the camera mode like we have with all of the Real Gear videos, he's something to look at, you know. It's definitely a really clean camera mode. You've got a little bit of little kind of panel lines where everything comes together, but that's kind of to be expected with something that works the way this does. And from all angles really, it looks splendid. You don't look at it and go, oh my god, there's a robot in there, you know. It's pretty unnoticeable for the most part, unless you already knew what this is and you kind of start fiddling with it, you know. Otherwise you think it's just some quirky toy camera. Something it does do in this alt mode, which is really cool, is it does have a clickable button, which is quite cool. Pushes in nicely. There's no other parts of this that are really functional. You have this little 07 Prime kind of a sticker applied here. That's stock, nothing I did. You've got some little detailing here. There you go. Kind of scroll through your photos. You know, all sorts of settings things. You've got a flash bit here. Got your lens on the front. This doesn't do anything. Would have been really amazing if it did, but you know, it doesn't. But generally though, paint and everything on this is really cool. I'm generally really happy with how the alt mode turned out. Let's just go for a size comparison. So for the alt mode size comparison, here we have Power Up VT6, High Score 100, Speed Dial 800, and Long View. So generally, the size comparison between all of these is really cool, you know. I'm still of the same mindset where I do think the portable gaming system and the controller could have been a little bit bigger for scale purposes, you know, amongst real world items and whatnot, because I was reading something like yesterday, and apparently these were meant to be 1-to-1 scale, which is really weird considering I've never handled a controller this small with this kind of layout, you know. So, you know, more for me, I guess, but whatever, you know, it's just something to point out that I read on TF Wiki. And long story short though, Spyshot is brilliant in this camera mode. Like with everything else, it's a nice bundle of stuff. By the time we get to the 8th and final Real Gear review, which will be the final mold, I think I've decided which figure will be last review, because it's the one I've got the least to say about. And it's definitely going to be interesting seeing all of these together, you know. I might actually do one whole thing with the size comparison for that last review, have them all in robot mode, and then the alt mode review just be all of them in alt mode as well. So yeah, that's something to consider. But overall, I'm really happy with the size comparison between all of this stuff. Could be really good for just kind of a role playing, I guess, you know, if you, I don't know, say a Transformers convention, if you can modify this to get a strap on it, you can walk around with it on your neck, and anyone that sees it might know what it is. Maybe an idea for TF Nation next year. But yeah, brilliant stuff. Let's just jump straight into our transformation. So for the robot mode on Spyshot, I think he's a bit Frankenstein-y, with the kind of a big old square head, or it's a bit rectangular, but you know, it's really cool. It's very nicely sculpted. Now, honestly, this is definitely my favorite head sculpt so far. Gorilla was very basic. Longview was kind of just a very simple dude. Speed Dial, he was a bit uncanny with the kind of nose and a human-esque mouth, you know, but whatever. This guy, on the other hand, really beautiful stuff. He's got these like goggle eyes, mouth, nose, kind of a chin block bit there, whatever in the world that's supposed to be, but you know, generally really cool stuff. I like to have him, now you could, and I believe it's meant to go like this, where you have these two sections together, but I think for the kind of extra little bit of a stance you can give him, I do like to split the legs right down the middle, and due to how all this this assembly is constructed, I don't think it's that much of like anything to look at, you know. It's cool. And generally everything about this, I don't have anything bad to say, you know. Even the transformation process is definitely a bit tricky if you don't know what you're doing, but getting this back and forth is really not that hard once you remember. Just start with the legs and swing them around that way, and then start to position the arms in place. And the key thing to point out is you just kind of work with the curved sections. You know, as you can see here, there's like a certain shape you have to form. Once you kind of remember that and figure out that the legs have to swing to the left, and it's all on this really nice axis, which is absolutely brilliant engineering. It's a little bit complicated in places, you know, especially for what would have been a kid's toy at the time. But you know, I'm generally welcome to it, you know. I'm welcome for something different as long as it's enjoyable and not an absolute mess. Let's just move on to articulation. So for the articulation on Spyshot, here we're just going to jump straight into it. Now, due to how this whole assembly works on the kind of a circular section of the torso, you do get arm movement, shoulder movement here and here. You know, it's on a slider or whatever. There is a very soft ratchet joint in here, which is cool. So you get all of that, then you get this kind of universal ball joint taking you all the way around there. Arms basically pull a 90, mostly for transformation, that it works like that. Spin the elbow around on the ball joint, as you can see it pops off. Oh well. It's kind of just a product of using ball joints, but that was the norm back then, so here you go. Elbows pull a 90, that's fine. Modern figures do that anyway. Hands, articulate hands is really cool on something like this. There you go. Just kind of claw open, claw close. Turn it around if you want a more uniform look, but that's not going to affect anything besides the use of the elbow. So you could, man, never mind. I had an idea. The idea was not a good one. Yeah, I was convinced that this little block that the ball joint was on here, you could rotate it a little bit, but you cannot. Ah, bloody hell. Right. Okay. So the arm movement is the same on the other side as well, you know. Same whole shoulder assembly. So we're just going to move on to the head. Get confused dog left and right, you know. All of that stuff. Good old down movement. Lots of up. Swivels all the way around. You get. And then due to how all of this is assembled, you've got a kind of massive head movement off to the right. Moving down to the lower part of the body. Legs, if you really want to, you can kind of bring this whole joint out. Have something really kind of crazy and cartoony going on. That's definitely something interesting to point out. But there's no waste due to how this all works, and I'm perfectly cool with it. Legs kick up that much. Legs kick back that much. Knees, pretty deep, you know, they start to collapse in on themselves due to how it transforms. You've got this outward pin joint going out from the thigh. Bit unusual, but it's something you can use. And that's pretty cool to point out. There's no thigh swivel on this, but due to the fact that the hips are ball jointed, there is a bit of a swivel there, which is welcome. No toe bend or anything like that. But you do get this knee swivel here, which is really cool. So generally, articulation on this guy is solid across the board for his size. And it's definitely something to kind of praise given how this transforms, you know. The fact it still poses at all is really incredible. Just a testament to the Hasbro and Takara design teams at the time. So from here, we're just going to go straight into our bot mode comparison. So for Spyshot's bot mode comparison, here we have 2007's Deluxe Long Arm, 2007's Deluxe Swindle, 07's Legends Class Bumblebee, Ralph, Steve. Now I did miss off the comparison to Ralph and Steve for the alt mode, and that is something that I'm not going to go back and change because I really just wanted to get a look at it with all of the other Real Gear robots so far, and I don't want to kind of clog up the screen when it comes to all these comparisons, given the fact there would have been 5 things on screen anyway, so I'm not making it 7. But you know, this generally I'm kind of happy with, you know, all of the Real Gear robots being bigger than Legends, smaller than Deluxes, it's all cool. Ironhide isn't here for this review because I've been working on it, working on something else that involves him. So he's currently in alt mode here. This will get a review eventually. I've already decided what's going up at the end of this Real Gear Robots week, whatever it is. So Ironhide isn't that, but Ironhide will be within the next couple weeks. You know, probably early September at this point. But it's definitely something to look at. And yeah, the comparison for this I think is good. You know, I'm happy with how it is. He's definitely a bit taller for what he's Real Gear figures. He's kind of quite high up compared to the Deluxes. Towers over the minifigures, which is nice. And then the Legends class figures, you know, I don't like to use these for size comparisons, given the fact they were their own kind of subsidiary class or whatever, you know. These are meant to scale with one another, not everything else, for the most part. So, you know, it's nothing I'm concerned about. And let's just move on to my final thoughts. Okay, so for my final thoughts on Spyshot, I don't have too much to add here. I'm not going to retread any old ground. I just want to kind of give my rankings, tell you whether I recommend him or not, and then we'll kind of move on from there, do the outro. Now, aesthetics on this guy, definitely a 5 out of 5. I love the robot mode. It's unique. It's a bit blocky, but it's also just kind of... there's some unique shapes going on here at the same time. And for how the assemblies work for the arms and legs and how everything rotates on an axis, it does allow for a really cool silhouette. Even if not the most fancy thing in the world, it's definitely well engineered. Camera mode as well looks brilliant. No real complaints there. Transformation on this guy, now it is a bit complicated, and I do want to point out that given the fact that Transformers at the time was kind of still a franchise aimed at children for the most part by Hasbro, I do think that this would have been a bit of a complicated ask for a child, you know. Especially, like, I look at it and go, if I was little, how in the world would I have figured this one out and how everything goes together? Because it's not the easiest process in the world. But it is really well engineered and it does accomplish good results on both ends. So I definitely will give it a 4 out of 5. Articulation on this guy is very good for how everything works and kind of the whole engineering side of things. That's the most impressive thing about this figure and many of these Real Gear robots. The engineering on him is just brilliant, you know, for the size and everything, and the fact that a lot of them can still pose, it's more than welcome. So articulation on this guy is also a 4 out of 5. And then value for money on this guy, definitely I want to go with a 5. Now, even if the transformation is a bit more on the complicated side of things, and it's definitely the hardest of the Real Gear robots to get transformed, I definitely think this is still excellent for the £7 price point, you know, or $7 wherever you are. Just generally brilliant stuff across the board. You get a really cool robot for your money, you know. He's an Autobot as well, which is also nice to bolster out your ranks. So yeah, definitely a welcome addition to the Transformers collection of really anyone that likes this Bayverse stuff. So this has been AnimatedCHUG. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.